Alright, good morning. Back to this 2002 L59 flex fuel 5.3 liter LS GM engine. The balancer, it went ahead and installed because it kind of squeaks into place under the hood. The exhaust manifolds were on when it was removed, and that made it difficult, but to install this is a pain while it is in the engine. I've had to remove the front cover to replace the water pump and the timing chain on the original engine. On this here, takes a metric bolt, and there's a torque procedure provided on the new bolt that comes with some silicone on it there. And of course I had to convert Newton meters to foot pounds or pound foot in order to be able to do it properly, because I hadn't pulled up my downloaded torque specs for this engine and printed it out yet. So went ahead and used Google to get the adjustments anyway, and each different spec provided is a little different. This bolt is not long enough to draw it in. There are tools made for installing your balancers in your crankshafts, and mine that might have the threads for that is broken, and actually it was probably for 1/2 inch, not for the metric size. So what I had to do is take a seal driver and go ahead and leave the driver off of the shaft that drives it, but it's got a bolt. I put flat washers that would fit against the balancer surface out here, slightly larger than the head of this bolt, and then some other flat washers to give it an impact surface. Put the nut on the back side to center it, and the shaft is long enough it stuck inside the crankshaft without getting near the threads inside there for this bolt. And so I was able to have the back end engine of the engine blocked against a post of the building and hold that all steady and smack it several times with a 5-pound shop hammer to get it gradually up in there and just make sure everything was good. I put a little bit of the engine oil on the outside of the surface after, of course, first checking to make sure there was no groove in it that would damage the new seal, and also cleaned it with, instead of a rough emery cloth, I used just a real fine sandpaper and then cleaned that off. So I put a little thin coating of my VR1 Valvoline engine oil on the inside and outside of it so it wouldn't be a dry install. Knocked it into place, then used the old bolt that came out of it and torqued it down to 130 foot-pounds. Then removed it and put in the new bolt, torqued it down to the 37 pounds-feet, and then attempted to rotate it another what's it say, 140 degrees. That's almost half a turn. That's over 1/4 of a turn. And frankly, yeah, I couldn't get it that far. And I wish I had the piece tool here. What I did to keep it from turning, since obviously it's not attached to a transmission, is I took the these two bolts out of the crank. I had a galvanized steel plate about 2.5 feet long, had a hole in the end, so I threaded it on one bolt. On the other bolt, I took a steel shift bushing. The hole was too small, so I drilled it out so it would fit over this metric bolt and snugged it up here, snugged that rod up here and had it hold, and then it was able to turn down and rest on this block, because I had to have some way to prevent the crankshaft from turning. Then I was able to do all that torque. And of course, to loosen it, well, it wanted to just turn in reverse. So I stuck my foot over there on top of the thing to hold it. And as stated, the new bolt came with silicone right on the back side of the head to seal between the crankshaft and the dampener. If you're having to reuse an old bolt, make sure to clean it thoroughly and to put a thin coating of silicone on there and let it set for a few minutes and get tacky, so it won't just all squeeze out. So it'll make it actually somewhat of a gasket, but don't have it all thick and gopped up to where it'll prevent you from getting a proper torque, because if it prevents that, it will quite possibly come loose, vibrate out, and shoot through your radiator, or at least fall down and get slung into the radiator. Okay, we got new, what the heck you call these stupid things, the knock sensors. Had to put brand new ones because one broke. They're underneath these deals, and I've got them nice and snug. They've got to be torqued to oh, where the heck is it here? Anyway, the knock sensors, 15 pounds-feet. They've got to be torqued, and if your torque wrench only goes down to 20, well, you can use an inch-pounds and just multiply that by 12, and obviously you get your inch-pounds to use that. I put a very thin coating of the super lube on the threads so that if any moisture gets under there, they won't rust. Just very thin so it's not messy. Then on the plugs on them, I also put just a little bit to seal from moisture. And then on these seals, that's part of the reason they don't want to pop out easy, and they're not supposed to. They've got to keep water out. The old ones got dry and brittle from hot and cold temperature change, and they let water in to sit in there and rust the old knock sensors on that old engine. So I put on the wire underneath and on the outer seal of this plug that super lube, so it'd slide in easy, but to help it seal from moisture. Had to reuse the gaskets on the plugs for the fuel rail. The rear ones are still taped over for the tube, the return tube to go on. And I had to torque those 89 inch-pounds. Then took the covers back off, and oil had come up when I pre-lubed this, but it wasn't a whole lot. So I took the jugs that I had poured out and opened them and poured the last little bit over all the rockers in there to make sure everything was a little lubed, cleaned up the surface of the heads, went ahead and put the brand new gaskets. I didn't have new gaskets for here, but I've had to replace them a few years ago, so they're still in great shape. Just thoroughly cleaned them with a rag, get them all nice and dry, and then put a little bit of that lube on there so it'll help them seal up. And those are torqued to 106 inch-pounds. Now, some of my torque wrenches don't go real low, so of course, here's the half-inch drive old Craftsman torque wrench, only from 20 to 150 foot-pounds. So if I got to go over that, I need a larger torque wrench. There's a fairly reasonable 3/4 drive that'll go up to like 400 or 500 foot-pounds at the darn Harbor Freight store. When my boss was looking for one, there happened to be a young man see us looking at it, and he said, well, they had to get one of those for their torque on their race cars and stuff, and so far it's worked just fine, hadn't broke or anything. Supposedly it's still got the same torque. Some of the torque specs on this, specifically in the documents come out from the specifications I pulled online, show something a little different here. crankshaft balancer bolt installation. Fast to ensure the balancer is completely installed. 240 pounds-foot. And then with the new bolt, 37 pounds-foot. And then afterwards, your final pass, the same 140 degrees. Make sure you don't pass 140 degrees. But if you can't quite get that, just tighten a living snot out of it. Okay, what else? We already covered the valve cover, bolts, and this and that. So that's about it for today. Oh, I had to look up online spark plugs. I went ahead and pulled the spark plugs out, squirted just a little bit of upper cylinder lubricant injector cleaner in there to have that upper, and then cranked the engine over with the ratchet several times with the plugs all out so it could blow any excess back out of there. It wouldn't seep down into the crankcase and make any problem of washing out anything with the oil. And then spark plugs, there was different specifications, which is ridiculous, anywhere between 132 156 inch-pounds. The original manufacturer tag on the vehicle shows 60 thousandths gap. The parts store and stuff online shows 40 thousandths gap. What I did is set my new spark plugs at the widest gap of 50 thousandths. They're more fuel efficient at a wider gap, but if you don't change the plugs as soon as you should, then they get past 60 thousandths gap, and it's hard on your spark plug wires and especially all your 8 ignition coils, and it can wear them out and cost you more. I decided to take a happy medium because I've also had claims that at 40 thousandth gap, that's not good either. Well, General Motors has supposedly changed their recommendations. I use the AC plugs, just the basic ones. Apparently the old ones were a little higher quality, but when you're having to spend several thousand at once, it's kind of hard to pay twice as much for a stinking spark plug. Anyway, as the note reminds, and I mentioned in a previous video, the crankshaft has holes all the way through. I'm hoping to get some new bolts, but if I can't, I'm going to clean those up. And on the threads of them, not on the tip, because I don't want silicone. I will just use an ultra black silicone. I'll clean them with brake clean and a rag, so forth. Maybe a wire brush if necessary, if there's anything won't pop off easy. Shouldn't be a problem, there's no carbon. We'll put maybe 1/8 quarter-inch back from the tip of the threads, a little bead of ultra black silicone all the way around, thread them in, and torque them to where are we at? I know the flex plate's on here somewhere. Crankshaft. Anyway, you can do something like this here instead of having to have a phone or a computer or whatever. If you got a printer, dadgum, consider just printing it out so you can get it all dirty and whatever, and it don't really matter. Either that or use your laptop or something and put some of that shrink wrap over it that you use in the kitchen. I can't hold myself or anybody else up much longer. I've got to get those chains back on here. The bolts I used to remove the other one were incorrect somewhat. They work, but still I didn't want to take a chance with these nice heads on this done. I used the bolts that actually belong down here for the AC compressor mounting to go up in the head because they're identical thread. Made sure to use the longer ones available. And I don't go jerking things around because I don't dare want to damage the threads or break the bolts off into something. So this is about to have to get installed, and thankfully it's reached somewhere between 50 and 60 degrees, whether we're in the shade or the sunlight over here now instead of the 32 it was this morning. So thanks for tuning in, and if you didn't see the previous, there's other videos on this. There's some on tractor maintenance and big truck Peterbilt maintenance and so forth that might be of interest, especially if they might help somebody you know. Thank you, and have a blessed day.